Hello and welcome to 2023. Now, obviously, I know it's the 9th of January, so it's not exactly like I'm punctual, but I feel like this week is the first real week that we're back at work. So if you happen to have seen, just please feel free to say hi. I'm here. This is a very spontaneous decision to go live this morning. Actually, I didn't know that I was going to do this up until about 5 minutes ago. But I thought, what better way to start the new year than to quickly jump on, say hello, share a few ideas, share a few updates about the coming year. So with that being said, I think I named today's session Increased Awareness of Gender Equity in 2023. And for those of you who don't know me, I am Leanne Meyer, and I am the CEO and founder of Benefactum Consulting. And we are specialists in helping organizations accelerate their gender equity efforts. So the exciting part for me is that the International Women's Day theme for this year is embracing equity. Now, why it's so exciting is because we mostly talk about gender equality. And for me, gender equity is going that step further, that really encompasses intersectionality, that encompasses the fact that whilst we are looking for men and women to have parity, we still need to acknowledge this hierarchy amongst women, and that we also need to flatten that hierarchy as well at the same time while we seek to achieve gender equality. And when I think about that becoming a mainstream concept, it makes me really, really excited, and it makes me really, really happy, because what it's going to force individuals who make up organizations to do is to critically analyze what methods, what processes and procedures they have implemented up until now that still perpetuates the same hierarchy amongst women, meaning that for the most part, up until now, the beneficiaries of gender equality, the beneficiaries of feminism has been predominantly white women. So how are we now going to extend that to women of color and Black women? The answer is in gender equity. By looking at and critically analyzing what are the different barriers, what are the different experiences that women in each of these groups face in order, hello from Paris, in order to create opportunity. Because what it shouldn't be is the women need to change. The women need to change in order to be better. No, that's not the narrative that it should be. The narrative should be, how can we as an organization look through the lens of our processes and procedures? How can we apply a gender equity lens to understand how it is, for example, that we've got to the point that the majority of women in leadership are still white? How is it possible that women of color and Black women aren't making it through? Because it's not due to the individuals lacking, but rather due to the fact that the system that has been created and perpetuated has not been scrutinized enough to see where the issues are. And I think this topic, and I think the fact that the theme of International Women's Day is embrace equity, will drive a different perspective this year as to how organizations approach the topic of gender equality, adding gender equity into their strategy, looking at the impact and needing to address racial equity in order to address gender equality. That we still can't defer and say, I will focus on gender first and race later. Not possible. Looking at me, not possible. You cannot extrapolate my gender from my race. They come together. And those are the barriers that are faced in the combination, in the intersection of that identity. And knowing that this is going to be more of a mainstream topic makes me happy, But it doesn't make me happy just because this is what I do. It makes me happy because there's now going to be enhanced accountability for not doing this. It's not going to just be enough to say, obviously we have the UN SDGs and number 5 is gender equality. And of course, that is something I will always be pushing for. But it's also looking at the fact that we have to do more to get to that. Absolutely, Rukayat. The structures and society need to change in order to foster parity. And parity can only come through equity, which is looking and accepting the fact that they may be different. It doesn't, and I think we still get this confused when we use words like fairness. And fair means doesn't necessarily mean it works for everybody. What we're trying to get to is, what is it systemically and institutionally that needs to change in order to create the same amount of opportunity for Black women and women of color? What does that look like? And this is going to be an interesting conversation, because in a video I made at the end of last year, I was saying, what was it that I was doing in the course of last year, post our experience chasm survey, the year one. And one of the main things that I was doing was socializing this concept of the need for specificity. It can't be avoided. But there's still a general institutional reticence to look at racial equity as well as gender equity. And now that International Women's Day celebration and Women's History Month celebrations will be formed and based upon embracing equity, it's going to be a turning point, I believe, in the narrative as to how we look at how do we support women. Not how do we support Black women? How do we support women of color? This has to be, and I think it will be driven by International Women's Day in many cases. It's great to say I embrace equity, but what does that mean on the ground? What does that mean in your day-to-day business? Are you really doing that? Do you understand as an individual? Do you understand as an organization what that looks like? Because I hate to use phrases sometimes, but the proof of the pudding is in the eating, right? So if you're still looking year upon year at your organization and you're looking at retention figures and you're still seeing that you're struggling to retain Black women, you're still seeing that, as I said before, I don't believe there's a broken rung. We can call it a phenomena as in what you will. The principle exists, yes, but it's not always a broken rung. It's a systemic barrier. There is no reason besides deliberate prevention. It's not from a qualifications point of view, because the burden should no longer be on women to do more and to prove their capabilities. The burden is now on organizations to make those changes in order to remove those barriers. And that's a very different positioning. And it can feel like you're already doing something, or sometimes a lot of organizations feel like they're doing more than enough because they have set particular targets, because they can see, there's a slight shift. But, and this is the big but, if your retention numbers are telling you something else, if there's a particular demographic within your business that keeps leaving, it's a clear indication that it is not enough. And this is for me why I think in 2023, and I don't necessarily think that we're going to start to see all the fruits of labor, but I think increased awareness in 2023 will drive more meaningful changes in 2024. Because there's still going to have to be that element of reckoning with discomfort around topics such as racial equity, in being able to drive this, for want of a better word, diverse workforce that organizations are looking to build or looking to develop, deepen. Without equity, you can't get to inclusion. Without equity, you can't get to belonging. Because if the fundamental mechanisms of you feeling like you belong and you feeling like you can thrive are lacking, it makes no difference what initiatives there are within your organization as an employee. And I think this is going to be a really, I would say, not challenging per se, but there will be an element of challenge within this. Um, for organizations who have wholly and solely focused just on women to broaden their efforts without feeling an element of discomfort. But the discomfort shouldn't be any it shouldn't hinder anybody from wanting to engage. It should actually, if you feel uncomfortable, it means you're doing something right. If it's too easy, then there's a problem. Because breaking and changing governance and processes within an organization, number one, isn't always the easiest. Number two, there is always going to be an element of pushback. And number three, it's this part around challenging our own assumptions that the world is the way we see it. And thus far, we've done a really, really good job on focusing on women, but we've not done a great job on focusing on all women. So I'm really I'm keeping my eyes and my ears open. Eyes and my ears open. Yeah, that's right. To see who's going to really start to engage with gender equity. Who's going to really start to say, this is something we understand and we understand the need for it? Or who's going to just dig their heels in and say, nope, no, no, just gender equality? And it's not to say that gender equality is an issue, but the equity piece has to be part of it. And it can't be a hidden part of it either. It has to be an explicit part of your agenda, as an explicit part of your strategy. And to ignore it is to make a deliberate choice not to want to help Black women and women of color. Deliberate choice. The more mainstream the idea becomes, the more difficult it's going to be to ignore. And those who decide to ignore it make a very, very clear choice. A very, very clear choice. Because when you look at if you go further down into the SDGs and you're looking at what it means, a part of gender equality, there is also a focus on gender equity in there. But my thing is, we shouldn't be picking and choosing or cherry picking which bits of gender equality suit us, but rather being very loud and proud about equity, gender equity forming a very clear part of your strategy, a very clear part of your business, a very clear part of your goals. So that was just my little welcome to 2023. Welcome to Leanne Myers page. Thank you, as always, for taking the time. It's not meant to be a very long session. It's just to say, think about this year and think about gender equity. Think about how you can start to implement that in your daily business. How can you implement that in any of the strategies, projects that you have? How can you incorporate that in your supply chain activities? How can you incorporate this in your recruiting activities? Over the next couple of weeks, I started with one. Over the next couple of weeks, you will be seeing several videos from me talking about gender equity in action, and we're going to look across the whole chain. Life cycle of an employee, looking at it from an investor perspective, looking at it from, supply chain perspective. What are small yet impactful things that organizations can do? And when I say organizations, I know someone said to me, an organization is made up of people, 100%. So whether you're a HR manager, whether you're a normal manager, as in just have people responsibility, whether you're a CEO, whether you're a CFO, what is it that you can do that doesn't make you feel necessarily overwhelmed, but brings you and puts you at the start of your journey. Because ultimately, this is what it's about. It's about starting our journey. Because what I've also learned, well, there's two things. One of the things that I've learned is we're not as far as we'd like to believe we are, despite having lived in I would say, a bubble of education for the past 2 years. We're not as far as we should be. Let's put it like that. But the second part is an organization cannot necessarily be good at the specifics until they understand the relevance of the rest of it. And I think this is one of the key issues for a lot of organizations in terms of sometimes jumping to be specific, is that they have to take a couple of steps back to kind of understand what it is they're trying to achieve in a general sense. Gender equity belongs within part of the business strategy, and that's whether you look at it feeding into the ESG strand or you look at it feeding into the DEI strand. They all come together. But the point is that there still has to be clarity on an overall strategy before you start to drill down into specifics and strong foundations. And I think this is where deciding to be more focused on gender equity is definitely going to show up. Um, when I say holes, I just mean as in inconsistencies within broader strategies. But that's not a problem because it means as you take the time to look at, you take the gender equity lens and you look at everything that you're doing, it will lead to a more successful initiative and it would lead to ultimately a better culture, a healthier culture, a more inclusive culture that then has the what's the word? The effect of increasing satisfaction with the organization, increasing productivity, which all has a positive effect on the business. So as far as I'm concerned, with gender equity, it's a win-win situation. Invest in changing the system. Invest in supporting Black women and women of color. Invest because your return on investment will eventually land on your bottom line because through increased productivity and through increased happiness and job satisfaction and a sense of belonging, it will drive you to your better profits. It will drive you to increased loyalty, better retention. So think about it. And I look forward to your feedback on some of my suggestions coming in the next couple of weeks. So, as always, thank you for your attention. I'm wishing everybody a wonderful Monday and a great start in the week. On that note, I say goodbye.